to alleviate our
I
suffering.
do want to ask Tom. Tom, do you think doors cause closed?
Jesus Christ.
Tom.
Give me a
Do you-
door
not
in
sure
your
how this is
head and we'll
relevant to using
experiment.
closing
I want to
doors.
ask Tom. Does he think that
You
doors
didn't answer his
cause
question.
closing doors?
You didn't answer his question.
What was his question?
If Tylenol causes a headache.
I already answered that question.
No, I didn't hear it.
Do
Can
some
there
doors
be
close?
closing doors without a door to close?
Do some doors
Well,
close?
do doors
better than
cause
other doors?
headaches?
Yeah, they sure as
all doors
fuck
close
do.
in some way, but some doors close better than others. So surely we don't want bad closing doors. We want good closing doors.
The point is that they don't cause closing doors, right? There's no causal tendency.
Yeah,
for
but
a
there
door
can
to
be no
close.
closing door without a closing door.
Exactly.
Hey, Danny,
told
what
you
happens?
that.
What happens if you bite the bullet and just say, yeah, doors is a causal factor in their closing?
Oh.
I just don't know what happens. Like, what's the bad entailment? I mean, it seems weird to say, and
That
it's
means
at
there's a
least
law- there's-
linguistically
the only
weird.
thing I can answer that question. That means there are
Still a
laws of
stupid
doors.
question. A door is not an agent, so.
Yeah.
Well,
The
this
answer
is
to
what
your
happens
question,
when you
Socrates, I think that if you think that there's that causal tendency, then I think you imply that there are laws of
Okay.
doors.
What's the
Okay,
physical
this is what
distinction
happens when you
between
Well,
door and
I-
agent?
Let's say I affirm. Yeah, I just want to say one
You
thing real
haven't
quick to
fixed
Danny,
the
and then
mic
you go
yet.
right after. I'm sorry. Okay, is this better?
No.
How's this? What if I
Your mic
whisper?
is a
this
little
better?
wild, buddy.
Could you change your mic from like 8 kilohertz up to whatever the standard?
I'd have to get another phone.
This
To
is
do
better.
that.
Whisper.
Can you get one
whisper.
from the
Okay.
just like in the last 5 years?
But
Maybe not like the 90s.
you surely could afford one, Claire.
That's
Okay,
fucked up.
Jack. If you could just sit on a spike, that'd be great. Danny, what?
Claire?
What if I? What? Shut the fuck up. What is? If I accept there's law-like relations of doors?
Oh my God.
Yeah. What if I accept that there's law-like relations in doors? Am I committed to anything weird?
Well, okay, so the idea, I think so, right? Like, first of all, let's see if I can vocalize. But like, first of all, we construe doors as like, my concept of door implies some kind of intentionality, right? So maybe, but you see, it sounds weird to say that there are laws of doors, but my concept of door involves some kind of intentional state. Whereas it's not really weird to say there are laws of rocks, because rocks don't, part of my concept of rocks, well, maybe, or maybe I should say trees or something. Well, even then, there are no laws of
I
trees.
think
and
like
rocks.
Speaking of rocks,
I think I did interrupt.
More fundamental, like there are laws of electrons or something.
Yeah, like
that
the
might
thing
be
is
more
that
parsimonious.
we can understand. Yeah, eventually. Yeah, what Lucas said. Yeah, I think there.
Well,
I might not
let's
be
just
good at
say we
vocalizing
have
that.
a non. Let's just say we have a non-family resemblance concept of doors, right? Like doors are
That's so
a closed.
weird.
Like
That's
when I say a door, it's a
essentialism.
closed concept.
Yeah, but, that
yeah,
means
but
it's
if I took-
I don't know what essence is though.
Is that like the would that be the entailment that I'm committed to be an essentialist about any category? I think there's a law-like
I think-
relationship.
yeah,
I
think
think
if
you'd
you-
have to believe that there's some kind of like natural teleology to doors.
I mean, there is to cause headaches.
No, I mean
Just
like
go from one
objectively.
state to another.
I don't. I mean, I still don't understand like the Aristotelian notion of like. I still understand the Aristotelian notion of like teleology and
Essence?
objects, but
But
Well,
I think that when people say that, like the reason why it's weird in the cause statement to ask, why are there laws of doors or something like that, or rather that someone asking, do doors cause closing? It seems that causation statements like are a kind of contextual statement that looks for a particular thing in a causal chain. And for instance, when you're
Right.
talking about doors closing, you're not looking for the door. You already know the door is there. You're looking for why is it closed? Doors don't tend to close themselves just how the way that we generally consider
Right.
doors to be. But
so you're saying that when we use hold on, quick question. When you're saying we use cause, it's a very contextualized notion, or it's like a contextualist position that we adopt naturally in natural language.
Yeah, it seems to be like it's almost like causal statements are like you're just looking for a particular kind of thing given the context. Like, so if I'm in the science context and I say causation, I'm looking for a pretty strict thing, like especially
Right.
physics. Like, I'm looking
Right.
for.
I think
like,
I hold that view.
What is
yeah.
the case?
I hold the
like, what-
contextualist. I think I hold the contextualist view. So I think I agree with you 100% on that one.
Automatic
Like
doors
it's a very overloaded term, and it's very it's going to what you mean I guess what you mean depends on what your intentions are, but like generally the usage rules are going to be very context dependent.
And then I would say it's reasonable to say that in the social context, the kind of statements, what causes people's behavior, religion is like a valid candidate. That's a
I don't know. I
particular
find those-
point. That's a particular point in the causal chain. It's an eliminable point in the causal chain, right? Like we can stop people from being religious. We can eliminate the religion by persecuting it out of existence.
Religion isn't
So-
a thing.
It's a relevant property with respect to like what we can do, because that's what we can practically do is going to influence that, is going to be part of the contextualism, right?
We can eliminate
right,
a lot of
but
gay people
one-
to get
one
rid
of
of
the-
STDs.
Yeah, we can.
One of the
but
pro-
we also hold
Wait,
on, hold
one-
on. We also
wait.
wait. We have. I agree with Danny. We can just like eliminate homophobia by just like, for instance, if we just had like a painlessly delete the gay people button. I think in some sense it seems like weird for a person not to press it.
Oh, I wouldn't press it.
In just the same sense
Yeah,
as like
Danny.
if there's a
That would be an
delete the
experiment.
entirety of if there's a delete the entire like wipe Palestine from history button. It seems like you're a monster if you don't push it. That's the only button you have access to, by the way. No other buttons.
If Danny pressed the button, would he go into a state of superposition?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Wipe Palestine away. Not
Wait,
only-
But the
the
idea is
question-
that the existence of
Wait,
Palestine.
I got it working in
even
a few
though it's,
seconds. Let me
like,
ask this quick thing really quick.
Uh-huh.
Do you know it's
Wait,
the what?
wait,
The existence of Palestine, you know it's the what?
It seems like one of these things was. I'm almost done. I gotta get going. I'm sorry, guys.
Palestine?
Okay, I'm
Wait,
gonna
hold
head
on.
out, guys.
Gotta leave in 3 minutes.
See ya, Danny. Yeah, I gotta leave in like 3 minutes.
Just gonna-
You
the
always
thing-
told this, Sock.
Yeah, it's always around the same time. Is the idea like with religion? Isn't that like a type of historical historical explanation? In which case, like it's kind of an open question. Like if you remove this thing, whether or not like for example, homophobia would still occur given like a delete the religion button happens.
As much, yeah. That's just an empirical question. You'd have to look at like controlled studies on religious groups. Like, do socioeconomical and geographically equal groups of people who just happen to be religious, are they more homophobic or something? If it's the case that they are, it seems that then that makes the prediction that if you remove the religion, it's just more rational to think that the homophobia would also go away.
I mean, wait, but are you skeptical of that, Luca?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get very
Seemingly,
far with
all
the
if
invoking
all
historical.
else held equal between two sample groups, there are two factors that are different: homophobia and the religion. Well, you can't remove the homophobia to remove the homophobia. So it seems like it's reasonable to think if you remove the only other disanalogous factor, the other disanalogous factor is probably going to go away.
Just a controlled. Yeah, it's like. Then again, when I brought up historical influences, it was like, oh, you believe the Big Bang, and I'm like, oh no, that's
The
just not
other,
I don't see
and then the
how-
Palestine thing to make sense of that, it's basically just to say that Palestine, even though that Israel's like advance into Palestine is disgusting, unjustified, and monstrous, if Palestine had never existed, the suffering wouldn't happen. That's trivially the case. And if the only thing you can do is just remove some other like contributory cause of the suffering, even if it isn't to bring justice or something like that, it just seems like there's going to be astronomically less suffering. In just the same way that if you could just delete all gay people, there would be no homophobia. There'd be less suffering in the world. It seems like you're a monster if you don't do that.
It seems like Hitler had the same idea, but he went about it the wrong
Well,
way.
no, but that's gonna be disanalogous because Hitler didn't have access to a painfully wiped from history all the Jews. He's like, I'm going to kill them in camps with gas.
He was working with what he's got. Okay, you got to give him credit for that. all right?
Well, that's the point. In the actual
but
world,
overall,
we
he
never have
reduced
access to
suffering.
such things.
Overall, Hitler reduced anti-Semitism. Therefore, Hitler was a moral good. What he did, right?
Well, but the
He's a
problem
hero.
is saying that is going to be some weird position where anti-Semitism and not suffering is the problem, not the suffering that anti-Semitism causes is the problem. So, like, there's astronomically more suffering in the world. There's just no anti-Semitism, so it's a better world.
We're a Mossad hit waiting to
Well,
happen.
Well, sure.
I think we're
but
underestimating
that makes sense.
how much
I mean,
sticking your
he
fingers
just
in
needs
the
to.
air would be helpful.
What should have happened is Hitler should have won, and then he could be working on the next group. Would be probably eliminating people with dark skin color, right? And then he would reduce suffering in the world even further.
But he wouldn't reduce suffering because the process of eliminating those groups of people, the way Hitler decided to do it, is by basically torturing them out of existence.
Yeah, but in the infinite, he's reducing future suffering, and that is potentially infinite.
By that, on that, we have like no guarantee. And given Hitler's track record as like a, what is it, like a delegator of resources, it's like pretty tentative to think that he would have actually been able to run a country.
Well, surely in the next 500 years of anti-Semitism and racism, all of that suffering being negated by simply eliminating Jews and eliminating blacks, it's a better world. Surely, right?
Germany.
It seems like prediction again. It seems like predictions like that are going to be incredibly tentative, and I'm not sure if I would. But if it, just like taking it as the case, if it is the case that you could like just strongly prove that there'd be less suffering in the world if Hitler had won, it just seems like that's the more rational thing to do, the more rational thing to believe should have happened or something like that. I just don't think there's a case for that. It seems really weird to say I prefer the world where there is both no Hitler and more suffering. Like, the world is by everyone's lights worse, but there's no Hitler.
It's like as if like Hitler has some sort of intrinsic evil property to him that is irrelevant to what he does. It's just that he could have been an artist like he wanted to be, and he'd still be as evil as he, the world would still be as bad off.
Like if I subject the entirety of the world to just being burned alive prior to Hitler's birth, there will be no Hitler. So we should prefer that world.
So a planet-killing asteroid strike would reduce suffering on Earth.
Have you seen Hitler's art?
It would also that's where you run into like the whole problem with like the only thing you're thinking about is the reduction of suffering. There are also things you want to preserve, right? Like for instance, the reason why I personally would like object to someone eliminating all the gay people as like a situation like a solve to homophobia is I want to live, right? So
it's like
there's just going to be like a number. There's going to be a number of things we want to preserve and a number of things we want to get rid of to reduce suffering. We just have to like
it sounds
do
to me like
the calculus basically.
You're making a special case for yourself, so we're going to have to eliminate you. So.
I'm not really making a special case for myself, unless you just mean like, I guess maybe you could mean that like I'm self-interested, which is trivially the case. I think most people are. Yeah, I don't think I would enact almost any suffering reduction program that would eliminate me, but I think that's true for most people.
Yeah, we seem to have mined this out completely. Going back to what Danny was saying, I tend to agree with him. I don't think that doors cause closing, and I don't think that religions cause some of the problems that are attributed to them. Right? That seems reasonable. The door is just a religion is just a belief system, right?
Yeah, the difference in his analogy is there was no agent involved.
Yeah, but then Danny would also just say what you said is trivial. Just like all you're saying is religion doesn't cause people to do things where it has no effect on them.
Well, I think one analogy that I've heard is comparing religion to say like a jar or a jug or something into which people place their pre-existing biases and beliefs and other various other things that they bring to religion and attribute to religion, so that religion itself isn't actually a thing. Right, but those biases, prejudices, and things like that are things that people bring to religion and attribute to it. So the attribution is wrong.
Right. So the jar would just, in Danny's, I don't know, in the discussion, the jar would just represent a person's predispositions and environment.
Yeah, and
Danny would just say what you said was trivial.
Yeah. The jar represents people's predispositions, and people just attach a label to it, but you know, it could just as easily have gone into any other the same kind of prejudices and biases that go into the Muslim jar can just as easily go into the Christian jar.
Like saying you've got a mixture of ingredients, and if you just stick it in the oven but don't turn it on, it doesn't do anything. But it's like it's the turning on of the oven that makes these things happen in the way that's like we don't want it to. If we don't like cakes, for example.
You know what this reminds me? It kind of reminds me of like when we ask people, what is it? If we ask people like, if we, do you object to sex with like underage girls or whatever? They'd be like, yeah. And then you're like, well, if we took away all your objections that made it wrong, would it no longer be wrong? Right? It's just trivial, right? But it's just like that's what this reminds me of. It's like, okay, well, if we took away all the reasons why religion makes or is a factor in, or when introduced, affects someone's predispositions to where they do action X. If we took all those away, would they still do action X? No. I don't understand why it's like
so
interesting to even talk about.
I think that religion is just sort of an excuse that people make for their predispositions that exist irregardless of their religious affiliation, and things like, in my to best of my understanding, things like racism and anti-Semitism. These are learned beliefs. People are taught to be racist, and then they just attribute it to whatever religion they're brought up in, right? Because the Hindus have been are recently are just as horrible as extremely violent. These fundamentalist Hindus, and have gone killing Muslims and stuff.
The difference here, Brenda, is religion is socially acceptable, and any views religion has, by definition, become socially acceptable. If it was socially acceptable, if it was written in the Bible that it was okay to fuck 8-year-olds, okay, then presumably it would have been, in historical context, okay to fuck 8-year-olds.
Well, it actually is. It actually is. It's 3.
No, it's not.
It's 3 years old and a day, I think.
There's no prohibition. There's no limitation on any age.
The Ten Commandments said, go out, it is your religious duty to go and fuck 8-year-olds. Okay, then people would be going out and fucking 8-year-olds and thinking it's perfectly normal.
Well, at least they would back in the day.
Right? And the same thing with, it's don't spare the rod. Back in the day, don't spare the rod meant you should hit your child if they misbehave. Right? So that's what people did.
Kill your child.
And
Kill your child.
People were applauded for doing such things.
It's like a religion is a representation
there's
of
the
people's beliefs. So like it's like almost like a feedback thing. So people have a certain desire to do certain things.
Acceptable.
It's like they think it's okay. They think there's a group of people that think, okay, hitting your child's probably good because it does something good, and then that idea like disseminates through the society to the point where the people who create the religion say, okay, well, if we put it in text saying that's God's will, then yeah, okay, so now everyone's told to do it, so it becomes now, okay, everyone has to do it. So even the people that wouldn't have done it otherwise are now told that they should do it. So now it becomes bigger, so there's now more people believing that it's a good idea, and it spreads and spreads and spreads. And obviously it goes both ways, back and forth, but it's like, if you've got the instruction set from God saying it's good to do it, and then on top of that you've got another set of beliefs that if you disobey God you're going to burn in hell, it all compounds to just increase the likelihood of everyone holding that belief after a while.
Well, people just reinterpret their sacred texts to mean to be in conform with whatever their current beliefs are. So it used to be that there was a big debate in America in my lifetime over corporal punishment, but I don't see that anymore. I think most people today understand that hitting children, spanking them hard, is now considered not a good thing, and you don't see people trying to justify that belief with their Bible. They just reinterpret the Bible.
Well, actually more along the lines of
The old saying that there are some laws that are honored more in the breach than the observance. I mean, you've got pure fundamentalists and Baptists, and to a lesser extent Pentecostals. You can bet your ass they still whoop their kids. You can bet your ass.
Yeah, well, this is the difference between like not to make it too cliche, but the difference between a free-thinking person and a religiously indoctrinated person. With a free-thinking person, they're more likely to use their own set of like values and obviously experience of how they think the world is to interpret whether something is good or bad. Whereas an indoctrinated person will not be given the opportunity to question whether maybe beating your child is good or bad. They're just being told it is, that's the right way to do it. And if they're also held away from people that could expose them to alternative positions that's like, don't beat your kids, then it's just going to increase the likelihood of that population just, carrying on that practice for longer. So I think it's more than just like a triviality of saying that those that have that belief will continue to have that belief. There's something within the actual practice itself that like biases people towards it, rather than just saying, there's just people that have that belief and there's people that don't have that belief.
When the book says, lean not upon your own understanding, I mean, it automatically prejudices you against thinking things through on your own.
What do you know, Gus? Get out of here, man. Crap.